possibilities of that that are not our priority.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
We're
So-
recording.
Are you recording?
Yeah.
Are we live?
Can you hear me now?
I guess I thought we were go live. Looks like
Go
we're
live.
ready.
There we go. All right, so welcome to the Active Teaching Lab. Today is H5p.org interactivity for Pressbooks.
Yeah, and remember to turn off that speaker in your Blackboard property.
So complicated. Technology. Where's
Now
the
you can choose to use it.
Which
Oh,
speaker?
Yeah.
John, which speaker?
Settings. Oh wait, no, it's yeah, it's settings. And
Like
then
art.
speaker volume down. And that way all of the microphone runs.
Are we good? Are we good?
Yeah.
All right, so let's try that again. So the topic of conversation today is two sort of separate but interrelated things. The first is H5p.org, which is a way to increase interactivity, but we're going to do it within Pressbooks. So to get some familiarity in the room, is this for anyone's first time with either H5p or with Pressbooks? New users, awesome. Do we have medium users with H5p and or Pressbooks? Familiarity and diamond medallion status. All right. And Mallory, would you mind introducing yourself and welcome back to the
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Mallory Conlon. I am a learning technology consultant on the Learn at UW team, and I primarily support Pressbooks and H5p integrations, which is what we're talking about today. So I can answer any questions that you have about it.
Mallory is the expert. So we're going to start off with some quick introductions. We're a smaller group today than anticipated, so that's awesome. We're going to flip a little bit of the lab. It's going to be a little bit more conceptual. Why interactivity? What's the value to it anyway? And then get into some clear examples of Pressbook usage, H5p interactivity, and then sort of working our way back out, especially for new users to sort of fiddle around and tinker with the technology, and then discuss sort of what are some of the challenges that you would envision for your own projects. So since we already started with Mallory, Bridget, could we start with you?
Yeah, hi, I work in Learning Support Services in LNS, and I am their instructional designer. I just started a couple weeks ago, and I'm
Welcome.
thank you. I'm going to be charged with working on the new undergraduate online curriculum. So.
Awesome. Welcome.
I'm Lauren Rosen, and something like 25 years ago, I worked for LSS.
Okay.
I'm upstairs from you.
Okay, looks great.
I direct the collaborative language program, which is a system-wide program for languages. And H5p came around, and I have to say that was one of the best things that I had seen in decades for interactivity and concept check kinds of things, assessments for students. I do not use it within Pressbooks because system doesn't, that's not what our usage is. Our usage is actually embedded within Canvas directly with an LTI. My question for today is about the message that we got saying something to the effect of H5p in Pressbooks in Chrome is going to be problematic. And so what I want to know, is it H5p in Chrome? Is it Pressbooks in Chrome? Or is it just the combination of the two?
Okay.
Yeah, we can talk about that for sure.
And also at the end of May, there's a huge event happening in Madison.
Yes.
H5p related?
The H5p International Conference will be at Memorial Union here in Madison. Registration is already going on, and we've got somewhere around 200 people so far that are attending from all over the world.
Awesome.
It should be really awesome. You should all come.
Sarah.
I am Sarah. I'm a graduate student in French and Italian on the French side. And I have this semester was kind of my first semester using H5p in Pressbooks and with Hypothesis also.
Okay, awesome. Mario.
I'm Mario Pella. I'm an instructor in the biochemistry department, and I would like to start using H5p for an online course that I teach
This summer? Okay. Is it a high enrollment course, small enrollment?
It's relative. So last summer we had like 130. I don't know if that's considered higher.
That's massive, yeah. In my eyes. At least a 15. Eric, help me out.
Yeah, and I'm a prof on Preschool Institutional Sciences. I have a class that will consider massive.
Okay.
So I'm always interested in learning new technology that might help.
Awesome.
And I've never heard of neither
Awesome.
Pressbook or H5p.
Okay, perfect. Peter, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm Peter Van Clem, faculty in kinesiology, teaching neuroscience-related courses. And I've been using Pressbooks for a while, and I didn't have about H5p for a while, but I have not found time to make a start on it. But my intentions are good.
Hopefully you can get started today. Some good examples. Awesome. Lynn.
Hi, I'm Lynn. I teach in the biochemistry department, and over the past year or so, I have developed a Pressbook for my biochemistry lab course, so that students don't have to purchase essentially a course pack. That was the lab manual before. So I used Pressbooks as a platform for that, and H5p was really easy to integrate into it. So I think I'll show some examples in a little bit of some of the kinds of H5p interactivities that I put into my Pressbook. And the question that I always have is how much interactivity is too much, or how do you decide how much, the right amount of interactivity to integrate into things like that?
Shoko.
I'm Shoko Miyagi, and I'm in the HR department in UW system. And I'm interested in H5p, but I don't have any access. And so I've been intrigued by it, and I want to try it out. And I tried the free version. So this whole access thing is still an issue for me. I guess I'm not in a Madison instance. So
We'll talk.
Yep. So that one, and then the interactivity part would be great, because what I'm trying to build out is something super boring, like harassment laws and stuff. So, but like you said, like how much interaction is too much when people just have to check the box that they said they took this class. So that's kind of where I am.
And last but never not least.
Absolutely. Cliff Cunningham, work with Learn at UW team, work alongside Mallory, but I'm more on, I'm not directly connected to Pressbooks. So anything I learn here is good, just to provide good support.
All right. So what I want to move on to next is just sort of more of a get the ball rolling. John and
John Martin. I have a very burning question, and that is for the people who have created these H5p instances and interactions. What percentage of your effort was based on learning the technology and doing it, and what percentage was based on what kind of thing should I ask? How should I ask it? What are the elements of this? The reason that I'm asking this is because I'm looking at having students create H5p instances, and I'm wondering, am I going to make them spend so much time on the platform, learning the platform side, or am I going to are they going to be spending most of their effort thinking about how do I represent the knowledge that I have? So as a sort of a way to show their learning, is it too much technical effort to make them do that? Yes, very good. And we'll dig into that later.
my partner in crime, Margaret.
I'm Margaret. I'm here to support the active teaching lab, and I'm also very interested in how to integrate it seamlessly into the course so that it's not a burden to the learner and so that it aligns with the objectives of the topic or activity.
Awesome. Okay. So just to get the ball rolling, and I'm very interested in the individuals who are here for the first time that really have no experience with H5p and with Pressbooks. The general theme or topic of interactivity and what that would look like in your course. I think you said you're teaching this summer, and you're also developing, Eric, are you developing a course for this summer or for later, the fall?
It's a course that has been around for 6 decades.
Oh, wow. Okay. So a way to enhance this course. All right. So I'd like for you to take a few minutes, maybe just 5, to think about some of these questions. Is interactivity H5p just a shiny new object, a cool thing that we're interested in? In your specific classroom context, either a massive course of 113 or a smaller French course of 15, what does interactivity look like? Is it always online? Could it be in a face-to-face interaction mediated through technology? And how does digital interactivity help students meet your learning objectives? So Lynn, sort of in your past examples, what are how do you measure that? But also the conditional would for you, Mario, as well, never having used it, and also for Bridget as well in your instances. Do you think it would help students meet learning goals? It's sort of a devil's advocate question. So I'll give you a few minutes to think about those questions, and then we'll sort of move into a larger, quick discussion before we see some concrete examples. And there's little pens and pads, just so if you can write down your thoughts first before we move into a small share. And Peter, if you want to work with Eric, and Sarah, if you would work with Mario. And then whenever you and your sort of table-ish mate, or you're in between two tables, but if you want to work with Cliff, or
I'm busy.
I think working with me.
maybe let's do a group of 3 here.
Okay.
And then can we do a group of 3 over in the corner?
Sure. Yeah.
And then you choose all.
Pardon?
Do you want to
It's
talk
kind of
to
cheating,
somebody
yeah.
who has like a
We'll let
big
Mallory
class?
answer all the questions.
That's right.
How big is your
Oh, I missed my.
I don't.
Berget.
Berget.
Berget, yep.
But you mentioned something about.
You are newish?
Yeah.
I'm newish in
Yeah.
LMS, yeah, not on campus, but yeah.
So I feel that, like, 'cause I'm writing the lab manual, so sometimes it's like for the list of steps.
Yeah.
But some, they're important.
Yep, so Jonathan and
Yeah.
Andrew
So like.
yeah, all those guys, yeah.
Do you want to start?
I will do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm instructional staff.
Well, my initial
So
reaction
like, as I alluded earlier,
is that it
there are
is a shiny
Yeah.
professors and all these folks who are
Yeah.
busy every day like
easier, but I can
there's somebody like me coming in.
I wrote almost exactly the same thing. I was telling my yes, but it's really all in the manner of execution. Right? Like if you,
But that's always the right answer.
so
That's right.
how do you,
That's right.
having students kind of institutions or what kind of answer to number 2, I guess, right? This question of overusing it, I knew it easily do too much. You know, where you're just having people click stuff just for the sake of clicking stuff, and I think that takes away from.
So, yeah, as the instructor, it's great. So I don't know, so what is the reasons why use Pressbooks only until that's when they decided.
Well, I mean, some of the H5p, like interactivity,
Approved it.
it's just like a real
From the perspective of it's legal and okay to use.
And I think like,
My department has.
I was doing that drag. It's like too much. Yep.
And anytime anything does not work or something struggles,
Right.
they devise.
Yeah, but that's not.
And that's, I think, what.
Or, and that's very.
Yeah, or it's just like,
How much
thinking
reflection?
too, yeah.
You don't need
Yeah.
a system of. Yeah, so the reason to buy the apply is because that.
Yeah, how did you decide?
I don't know that I really have a good answer for everything.
I'll read
Yeah,
them.
because I don't have.
Self-check, you can still use it.
Did you kind of?
Handle on what?
Which, that's what we
Right, initially when I used.
Right, but then so.
And I think, yeah.
You would then file.
I figure I better help us thing if somebody asks me, but sure.
Yeah,
I don't know, yeah,
like
like
that
that.
one relation type one is that it's
Well,
possible, and then we have community services.
Of course it is, and it's the digital activity in those lists.
I was.
So there's a,
And then the other thing too is that like,
the concept of interactivity.
if I requirement for the text or the,
at some point I just
undergraduate.
Right, starting.
But they're not developed out.
Sure.
So LNS
So
and then requirements for the SOD program. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So right now I'm working on atmospheric and oceanic reasons, one of them, which is poetry and commerce. Class. So it's gonna be a little bit of everything. They are, so they're kind of rolling it out as, you know, can't do them all at once. So, yeah, so they're all kind of on deck, but it is different types. So, yeah, that's the plan.
Pictures.
Very nice resume.
Yeah. It's all old news.
Literally.
You know, the last one they helped students, like,
All right, so before we look at some really awesome examples of Pressbooks and H5p all together, mixed-matched in very intense ways, for some of your own conversations, I heard that interactivity is a way to reduce the dullness of an activity, so HR compliance or sort of, I don't want to say the tedious steps in a lab manual, but just the steps in a lab manual. What are some of the other ways that interactivity looks like in your classroom context? Peter and Eric, what did you two talk about?
We talked about, you know, to get the people to discuss issues,
Mm-hmm.
you know, rather than just passively listen to something that you present. And so that, you know, like the Pressbooks and the interactivity that's associated with that is kind of like setting the basis for, you know, intelligently discussing issues.
Awesome. So would that be a way to an in-person conversation that's mediated through technology, or are they sort of both in their dorm rooms or in their apartments discussing synchronously at the same time?
It's mostly asynchronous, but
okay.
You know, like both. I mean, it's kind of like preparing the students for, you know, teamwork and interactivity.
Awesome. And then for the three of you, interactivity is a shiny object? I think Lauren's going to say no.
No.
What do you think?
You guys can speak.
Well, I was saying it's not a shiny new object. Like the concept is already there. It's always desired. Interactivity is always desired there. I'm thinking of it from the like from assignments of just close reading and for literature classes or language classes. But I do think that H5p has the kind of shiny face to it just because it's so intuitive, and the blue box format of questions is just recognizable and easy to use.
So I guess in that instance, in the case of a close reading, the interactivity is not between individuals, sort of what Peter's asking for, it's between what?
It's between the individual and the text, and then you have sort of like an instructor's analytical guide, sort of making things pop out to you and asking you to pause for a second and consider something. So it makes the reading as though you were reading alongside someone.
Sort of as a collaborative.
Or,
Awesome. So your first impressions.
Yeah. So my thought was very similar to Cliff's impact. We had sort of the same idea that yes, in a way, it's a shiny new object, but it really just matters in how it's executed, so that it doesn't become like a distraction or takes away from the outcomes that you really want your students to get.
Yeah,
it kind of brings me to the too much thing,
yeah,
right?
exactly. I was going to say, I think that's what gets to the question, what is too much, but where is it? I forgot. It was there.
It'll come back.
It'll come back.
It'll come back. Yeah.
So for those of you that are, John, yes.
I was thinking about, I know, like Shoko's question. Being in compliance, you have a lot of content that is generally individual students and their devices and going through that. And they don't have the other student or the option to talk to other students as much and to have that sort of human interaction. Human interactions are always way more sharp, I guess, contextually. They can sort of push back on different elements that they pick up, whereas a pre-programmed interactive object, you can't pick up on those nuances, sort of where somebody's at, sort of have to do a best guess of this is what I think that they'll talk about. But any sort of pushback is better than no pushback of a blank text. So in closed reading, if they're just reading and they don't have any place to go when they run across a word that they don't understand or a way that an argument is formulated, they don't have another student to sort of push back against. Anything would be better than nothing, I think.
I'm curious why you say pushback.
Pushback, challenge.
Because in the case of a close reading, it's sort of, I'm stuck, I have this problem, I don't understand the argument. It's not necessarily a form of, I mean, it could be a form of resistance if you go that direction, but.
Yeah, I guess the pushback is the, if I think I understand something, but then I do a rollover or whatever, and I see that I didn't understand that, I take that as, I guess feedback.
Sure, yeah.
Feedback is what I'm looking for, not pushback.
What's a close reading? What
is the best thing?
A close reading is when you're looking at both the form of what is written and then the content of what is written, and you're trying to like make meaning between the two. So, simplest example, if I see in a poem alliteration, right, all the same sounds are happening. I see that all the same sounds are happening, but then how does that attribute anything to the meaning of what's being expressed? So, in terms of literary analysis, that's kind of what it is.
Well, I think that's another example. As an English major and masters, we read a lot for, there's a different way of reading that than reading to understand arguments that are created, theory and research. Like, it's a totally different way to look at things. So when I came into grad school, I had no idea how to read research. And having somebody step me through, like, this is what's happening here, and this is what's happening here, I didn't understand that. And a close reading, I always thought would be a great idea.
You could do a close reading on an infographic, though. It doesn't have to be
Right.
extended text.
Okay.
Reading a film or
And that's fine. I don't want to sidetrack. I think there's something to learn here, so.
But I mean, but it's not really a sidetrack because this is a functionality of it you could do without Preschool.
You could do, yes,
Well,
exactly.
That's why I asked the question.
Right, you can add the interactivity using something like H5p.
Yeah.
Hotspots on an image.
Right, right.
So for those of you that are new to Pressbooks and H5p, we're going to go through a quick example just to give you an idea of what that's looking like. I'm going to show just I have a blank text that what is it, Mallory, what is this?
Plural. Whisk.pb.unison.org.
Oh my goodness, really?
It's
Yeah,
really good to have a
it
bookmark.
showed up, yeah.
So I'm still like at this stage of nesting dolls. Like, what should I use as a jumping off? Like, do you know what I mean? What's the container?
The container is Pressbooks.
Okay.
If you want to use a centrally
It's system, it
supported.
doesn't have to be, but the
Okay.
container in Madison is Pressbooks.
Right.
And if you don't want to pay for it, it's this.
Well,
Pressbooks.
that's not entirely true either, because you can do it in Canvas and not pay for it. You just don't
With
get
the free
analytics.
version, yes.
Okay, so before the nitty-gritty details, I don't want to lose the new users. So Pressbooks is to me, it seems like it's very much like a blog. It's sort of a web, to me, this is my elementary perspective on it. It's sort of a web page where you can contribute as much text, images, videos, really beautiful things. This is an example of a Pressbook, a group of Pressbooks that I worked with in the French department. There's a French professor in the department who created these Pressbooks that are sort of similar to close reading in French literature for his undergraduate courses. If you just visually sort of look at the page, it's not necessarily the most exciting. It's just sort of a little bit of text, right? So imagine in your course you have introduction to a lab material or introduction to a module in the online finance, personal finance. This is sort of basic text that is just sort of that. Some examples of interactivity that you can layer on top of this just to make things more complicated. Highlighting things like this, and Mallory, please help me if I'm going wrong. these sort of highlighted words, you click them and the magic appears over here on the right, where you can ask a question to students and give sort of a self-check in the way that Lauren described it. And this is an example of an H5p activity that you can create and sort of layer into Pressbooks. So it's a way to have content with a form of assessment that can either link, well, it can link to the gradebook in a very convoluted, complicated way, I think. And so that's sort of a basic presentation. Have I lost anyone?
And there will be a separate active teaching lab on that annotation panel, which is called Hypothesis. So you don't have to use Hypothesis to have H5p in your text.
And this is an example. So just sort of scrolling down again, there's an audio file within the Pressbook, images. And then here, this is an example, like Mallory just mentioned, of an example of an H5p activity embedded within Pressbooks. So as a way to scroll down and continue, I don't want to say scroll-a-thon, but it could be a scroll-a-thon. You're just sort of continue going down to the bottom of the page. You can just embed it there. Yes, sir.
Can you, for the Pressbook, this is a Pressbooks question. Can a student or whoever is using it, can they like convert it into a PDF and then print it out if they don't want to read it online?
Yeah, you can absolutely do that. You lose the interactivity, obviously, so the questions won't show up, or it will show up, but the student won't be able to see if they're correct. But you can export it as a PDF or as an EPUB as well.
As the student viewing it, can they highlight and mark and bookmark and
Only if you have Hypothesis enabled.
We have a lab coming up on Hypothesis, as Mallory said. We also have a lab on Pressbooks, specifically Pressbooks versus the engaged e-text on merch.
I have to make sure.
And I think, Lynn, I think in past labs you've mentioned that some students prefer the paper copy of the Pressbook. Would you mind sharing that? I guess.
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned that I use my Pressbook as a lab manual that replaces what used to be like a bound copy that they had to purchase. So I still give them the option of purchasing a bound copy. And I think so. Last fall was the first time I did this, and I think like 12 out of 90 students actually purchased it. And I sort of expected some small group of people would like to have like a physical hard copy. So I still gave them that option. And then I also provided them with all of the PDFs for the individual labs so that they could download those and print them off themselves. And so some subgroup of students also would just like print the PDFs every week and bring those to lab. So I think giving them options is good.
That's great. And because it's based on WordPress, it really translates very nicely to mobile or tablet or, all these different formats. They can print it off, they can have it on mobile, tablet, laptop, whatever they want.
So for the new users and for the frequent flyers, ready to move on to more elaborate, beautiful examples? Yes? Yes, sir.
More of a technical question. Can you control access?
Yeah, so access is only granted to people with .wisc.edu email accounts. So if you embed it in Canvas, like in your Canvas course site, then only your students will be able to see that, the site.
Register.
It'll automatically register them. When they click on the link, it will.
Registered in the class, yes. Yeah, whoever's registered in the class will see it.
Right, yeah, and they don't need like a separate registration to access Pressbooks. They'll just automatically access it through your Canvas course site.
Mallory, can you add a password on Pressbooks
Yes,
as well?
you can.
Okay.
You can make it password protected as well. So then if you really only want certain people to see it, or if you want to share a link with external users, you can give them a password as well.
I'm thinking about copyright issue.
Oh yes, yeah, copyright is a big concern.
The second question is, can you embed questions videos?
Yes, you can. So if you use Kaltura, you can embed the videos inside of an H5p question and inside of Pressbooks as well.
And you said if you have it in Kaltura, is that exclusive only to Kaltura?
You can also embed with YouTube, but for many reasons we don't recommend embedding directly from YouTube. For example, somebody who owns the media might remove it, and you don't have video. Also, certain countries and military bases don't allow YouTube access, so if you're teaching online, then those students are restricted from viewing the content.
So Sarah, could we start with your example?
Yeah.
So in this is a 300 level literature course, And this was just one of the assignments that students were given for one day. This is the first 5 pages of the novel that they started. And so if you take a look at the text, we just, because it's an excerpt, it's okay. We just essentially copied out an excerpt from the first 5 pages of the book. So students have an actual text copy, but then they also have activities that they have to do for certain passages. So this one, we embedded all of our H5p questions into hypothesis. So the reason why we did that is because it leaves the text kind of whole, and it doesn't visually interrupt it unless you open the hypothesis annotation pane. It also allows for just like, it allows for all of the discussion and annotations and sort of back and forth between students and the faculty member to happen all in one place. So when you click on, for example, the first highlighted, we've embedded a YouTube video. Sorry. We embedded a YouTube video that just is like, who is Amélie Nothomb? That's the author. Here is an example of, this is actually Professor Gibson Jennifer, who was sampling this out for her students in class to show them how to use the annotation. So she, she highlights cheval, which means horse, and then she's like, am I crazy? Like, what is this about? And then students can reply, I can reply, and then, someone else can embed another video to say, hey, you're not crazy, I did find out why she's talking about a horse.
So I'm thinking back to yesterday's lab on effective discussions, and this strikes me as a really good example of that redefinition of an online discussion based around this primary object. It's right there front and center. It's not having a discussion in a form that's so separate. It's right there, so the reference is right there.
Yeah, so you can essentially, have a discussion in this panel, or you can just have like comments that this is a student who made a comment about something here. And then here, see, this is where the instructor inserted an H5p question. So this is comprehension check, a multiple choice comprehension check. Here is another comprehension check, just to say Pékin is actually Beijing, that's just the French word, or French version. And then, so you have all these comprehension checks along the way.
Can I ask you a question about those?
Yeah.
Sort of links back to Margaret's question earlier. I guess, why is this needed? Like, how does this meet the learning objective of the course?
Yeah.
Just coming, why you have only, 4 or 5 pages that are excerpted, why some comprehension check questions? Would you maybe discuss a little bit like the pedagogical rationale for why you did that?
Yeah. Well, so we want to, like, the end objective is analysis, and for students to sort of read something, analyze it, have something to say critically thinking about it. But in a foreign language class, often your first stage is actually just basic comprehension. So you have to get through comprehension before you can actually achieve analysis. And what this section is so the rationale behind why these 5 pages, these are the first 5 pages of the novel. So the exposition. So it kind of introduces, it walks students through the first 5 pages. And helps to just give students footing. So a lot of the objectives for using H5p for us is to foreground some comprehension, to allow for analysis to take place that usually happens in like their write-ups or in more formal discussion forums on Canvas or in class or something.
Because what I'm also thinking too is that this interactivity also teaches them how to read. And so they understand sort of that there's maybe an explanation of the processes to which you've gone through these steps, reason why you're asking these, I don't say basic comprehension questions, but comprehension questions, because it leads to that sort of creation stage of critical thinking.
Yeah, totally.
Just make sure I understand. So they have a textbook, they're reading the first 5 pages, and here you have a summary of helping them to understand those 5 pages. That's what's written over there to the left.
It's the actual.
Actually,
Or
this is
text.
the text itself.
Okay, so that's fine. There's no copyright issue of putting that into the.
No, just because it's a section, like a little excerpt of it.
Okay, and then the
Required
questions you
them,
have
they
over there
have
are
the
those
book.
optional
They have
or
the
students
book.
are
Yeah,
required
that
to answer those to continue on.
So that's actually,
What was the question?
yeah.
No, the question was the questions that she has that are associated with the text, do the students have to answer any or all of those questions, or can they just skip them, or?
So that actually, they are not required to, because we don't have it embedded with the LTI, so we're not actually grading them on any of these H5p questions here. It's really just they do it, and we don't tell them that their answers go nowhere. We just
You just hope they do them.
We just hope they do it, and the feedback on it is that they love them because they help them understand the text. And then, if you do want to actually check that they've done it, we have a Canvas quiz at the end of the module, and it often is essentially verbatim a lot of these questions, and students know that.
So it's in their interest to
It's
actually
in their
do this.
interest, yes.
Yeah.
You know, I have a point to tag on to John's question about the online discussion thing, the modification or the redesign of the discussion. So I think, I like the idea of this annotation panel, but if you have a class of 100 people, are going to be commenting and reduce the direction in which the conversation is going, and so also you would kind of like, the questions that instructors embed, it might be, down the road a couple of pages. And so how do you deal with that?
This was a class of about 19 people, so that's definitely important. This was also the first time we ever tried having them discuss the text within the text. And yeah, it was just, we'll see how it goes. This was a blended class, so we still met face to face. And it changed definitely your preparation for the face-to-face time because you had to sort of see what was going to happen when students were reading, and you kind of had to keep up with it a little bit.
I imagine you can figure out some sort of grouping the same way that you would in a regular discussion.
Yep.
But I don't know, that might be a better question for the hypothesis lab.
Yeah, that could be, yeah. I think there are ways, like we created this private group just for the class itself. You can create private groups.
Okay, yeah, that's perfect.
You can also, so another way around it is that one assignment once was that students had to, make some kind of comment in the annotations page. And every student's comment actually has a URL, has a link share to it. And so one of the assignments was take a discussion post that you are proud of. You've maybe made like 10. Pick one that you're proud of and just add the link to our Google Doc. And then that was like the fuel for discussion in class. Because it'll take you straight there once you click on it.
Going back to Mario's question about is it required and if it's not required, do they do it? So we are talking to student semester, and we just did a survey. We had about 350 people fill it out. 55% of them said that they love self-quizzing. They love quizzing options that don't have grades associated with it because it's a low-stakes way for them to test their knowledge. And I see this as fitting in with that. 55% is not 100%, but it was just things that they mentioned. So it was volunteered. It wasn't even a choice that we asked.
And then just to add on to that, for instance, some of the feedback that you can give, you can personalize it for your students as well. You can enable retry buttons or don't show the final answer until all of the activities have been completed. So you can adjust that sort of self-check in ways that are a little bit constricted, but at the same time giving them direct and immediate feedback, which is always very useful for students. And then to see some of those examples, Lauren, could be
Yep.
yours. Thanks, sir.
Do you have the activity sheet up there? Because I just added my links to it. And we'll see how that works rather than plugging in.
Thank you, sir.
So Shoko and I don't work with people necessarily that have a WIS.edu account. So H5p, use the free version of it, it's self-check, you don't get any analytics. If you're in Madison, you can use it and get support within Pressbooks. If you're outside of Madison, UW system has approved legally H5p, but there's no support around it outside of whatever your unit is, okay? So my unit purchased the LTI so that we could get the analytics and embed it directly into Canvas, right? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the analytics or showing you that, but I want to show you some other things within H5p that you haven't seen yet, and why I think it's so powerful. So first off, so we use a lot of the interactive activity or interactive video and course presentation. We're using that a lot because a lot of the instructors I work with are flipping their lessons. So it gives the student the opportunity to learn outside of class. When they come into class, you can have the oral, I'm a language teacher, so a lot of the oral interaction can happen because the students have learned the lecture type of information prior to that. I'm going to show you some examples of both of those. Within interactive video and course presentation, many of these activity types can be added. And so what you have seen so far are some of these activity types, but you haven't seen it into the bigger envelope. So that's what I want to show you. This is Shannon Spasova. She's at Michigan State in Lansing, and she is a powerhouse when it comes to H5p activities for her Russian class. And I'm going to, so this whole page, which you can certainly, play through and look at the different types. I wanted to go to this one in particular because this is an interactive video. This is for first semester, first year Russian students. I'm going to start playing it. And these little dots down here, those represent spots where the video is going to pause and some kind of activity is going to pop up. So I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I'm going to jump through it a little bit so you can see some of the differences. Would we have sound from here? There we go. Okay. So you can pop up and just have explanatory text where needed. This here, she's got two different activity checks that pop up, and they have to look at, for example, for this one, they have to look at this in the video to be able to respond correctly. Let's see, there's another one in here if I can find it in particular that I like. Okay, so she can take an authentic document and embed that in there too with more information as it's connected to the video. So there's lots of different things that you can do within that. Yeah, John?
Is that document then, you click on it and it opens up in a new window?
I don't think so.
Okay, but it's just sort of.
It's just, so this, in this particular case, this is something that is very common in schools in Russia that students use for classes, and she just wanted to show them what the real thing is because that's what the little girl is writing in. So that was the point of putting that in there. So anyway, there's lots of different activity types that then get embedded right within the video pauses, whatever. Now Shannon has been using this for several years. She's got a ridiculous number of activities. She does everything as self-check because her institution has not purchased the LTI. And then in her situation, like what Sarah was explaining, it's embedded in their course management system, and then she does a quiz within the course management system to find out what they actually knew after having experienced the H5p activity. This is one which shows the presentation style. Hang on, let me make sure to uncheck that. This is where I have to see if I can remember my login and password, so. Give me a second. Cross my fingers, nope. Okay. I got one more possible try here. Okay, I might have to plug in my computer. I apologize for this. Okay, I'm gonna grab my computer quick. Sorry.
And sort of in between time, on the activity sheet, a lot of these links and introductions and sort of step-by-step processes are available on the digital version. So just sort of how to do it, step-by-step explanations and instructions with links to explanatory tutorials that H5p offers to new users. All that's available in obviously the digital copy, because as John always says, the links are here.
So we've got easy ones with multiple choice, so if you're just stepping in, try an easy one. If you've got some familiarity and you want to challenge yourself, there's a medium one on finding a hotspot, and marking words. And then if you're really going for a high-end thing, branching scenarios, that's very difficult to keep track of just the branches. But it's a good challenge.
Sorry, my desktop's a mess.
Sure.
Is this like a loading, because it's a very digital media heavy, does that influence if people are tuning in from
How long it takes for it to load, you mean?
Oh, if I log with my modem?
Yeah, Bayfield or somewhere.
Yeah, if it's in Pressbooks, we don't typically have any loading issues when there are a
I
lot of
haven't had any
H5p
loading
questions.
issues in Canvas either.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not like Flash or whatever where you have to.
No, you don't get the spinny, your computer's dead icon.
Yeah.
This is the interactive presentation. So in language classes, one of the trickier things to teach is grammatical concepts when you don't want to be using English. Right? So one of the nice things about this whole flipping lessons idea is that the instructors can take the times when they need to be in English outside of the classroom, so they can spend all of their contact time in the target language. So this is an example in Russian where she was teaching some concepts outside of class, and the students just flip through these slides. It's kind of like a regular slideshow, but then she can have interactive elements that explain things along the way. She can have concept check questions that pop up. She's got a variety of types here. Here's another type of concept check question. And she can embed them in all the slides, some of the slides, basically however often she wants them to be there. So that's what the interactive presentation piece looks like.
Lauren, Mallory, do you know, can you just upload a PowerPoint slide that you've already created into this? Or do you have to create them in this platform?
I believe you have to create it in the platform.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's not affiliated with Microsoft, so
Right.
PowerPoint wouldn't work in there. Yeah.
Or
It was a good
PDF
question.
slides or,
I don't
Talk to each
know.
other.
Yeah.
The interface is very similar to Adobe Captivate. I've used that. But it's not a challenge, but it's not, I don't think it's very user-friendly in my
For
personal
making the
experience.
course presentation?
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
really clunky, but I mean, it gets the job done,
Right.
but it's
It's not as intuitive maybe. as-
Right.
Yeah.
that's what I
learning different icons and
if I need to do a Google slide, I will create it in Keynote, export it as PDF, as PowerPoint, and then upload it, and make any fixes that I need in Google Slides. It's just so much easier because I prefer working in Keynote, so I was wondering if that was
I don't think you can.
Very good, thank you.
This does have audio in it too, that's part of H5p, I just wasn't playing it. See, I'm not. So that gives some instruction as well as the pop-up. So you can have multiple objects within a slide or whatever.
Sarah, you have a question?
Yeah, so just like a general question, would you embed then, so you have H5p questions that you create, that you embed within your H5p presentation, which then you would embed into Canvas on like an HTML page, for example, or like an assignments page?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, so you create an assignment and then you go to external tool.
Yeah.
And you pick H5p
Yeah.
if you have access to it, and then it just,
Select your,
you select which one of your H5p activities or interactive presentations, and it goes into that.
What if you don't have access to it in Canvas? Is there a way to embed?
Yes,
H5p?
so you can grab embed code from H5p
So
and
from
put
the
it
website.
from the, when
And
you
you can
create
put it
your
in Canvas.
H5p, the H5p activity,
Kind of go
you
through
can get the
Pressbooks.
embed code for it, just
Yeah,
embed.
it's trying to
That's
get
for
some
central
So-
support. Yeah, and her department pays for support
For
from
different-
H5p.
Wait, I can't hear, sorry. My hearing's
So
not
the
that
idea is
good.
you make an account in H5p, then you can link everything that you created in H5p to your Canvas.
Yes. And so the h5p.org site, which is the one I showed you that had all of the different activities on it, they are encouraging you after you create them to download them to your own laptop or whatever. And you can embed them into WordPress and to all kinds of different things. They want you to be doing that rather than storing on their website for right now. But I can tell you, Shannon, the one who did the interactive video, she has all of hers still sitting on. She has copies on her laptop as well, but she has all of hers currently sitting on their website, and they haven't gotten rid of them. I know that there's going to be some big announcements at the conference. I don't know if one of them is going to be a repository or not. There are several of us in here that are in languages, and I know that the International Association for Language Learning Technology is currently in the process of developing a repository for language learning objects, and we're starting with H5p. So there will be a place to store them outside of the H5p website.
And just sort of a related question to the repository, are you able to share, you can sort of pick an H5p activity that someone else has created and generated, and then embed that into your,
Yeah,
so if you have colleagues that have, their own activities.
in here, there's this reuse button. If I click on that, it allows me to copy the content. Now, as the owner of that object, I believe I can choose whether or not I want to make that available.
That's only if you own it, but not if you create it. If you create it and you keep it on their site, isn't that available for everybody? Or is that one of those, as long as we're hosting it, it's open to anybody?
So I think it's when you create the activity that you decide whether it's something that can be reused or not. Now, they are an OER company. They want you, they encourage you to share. That's their whole thing. The only way they make any money to support creating new activity types, and they encourage other people to develop new activity types, some of which will also be presented, I think, at this conference. The only way they make any money is people who buy the LTI.
So this copy content is, in some ways, it's like the way that I learned HTML. I found web pages and I said, this looks cool. I copied that HTML and I went in and I changed the particulars of it. It's the same sort of idea here.
Yeah.
And it's an assignment. This is an
Yes, this is it. Yes, you do it in an assignment because here, I'll
passes the grade.
let me go back to. She won't care if I don't save something in her thing. So Canvas might give you the spinny ball of hell, but H5p won't. Okay, so if I want to create a new assignment, just to show you quickly what it looks like when you've got the LTI. I scroll down here, and I do external tool, and then I can go to find, and I have H5p, and then I can choose which one of my H5p activities I would want to insert there. So that's how you get it into Canvas when you have the LTI.
You don't on this campus.
Any other?
So we don't have this.
Yeah.
I just asked that too.
Unfortunately.
Okay,
Yeah.
but-
However,
Uh-huh.
you should get it, so talk to your people.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? I did put the link here to the conference. I would encourage all of you to come. It's gonna be really awesome. And it's right here in Madison, so for you, it's pretty inexpensive.
So is anybody having students create H5p content as a learning activity that you're aware of?
We've had some in system, especially at UW-Milwaukee. They've hired students who are upper level students of Japanese who have created a ton of activities for the Japanese instructor.
Okay. I'm thinking of a student
But do
group
you mean
project.
like in a, I was gonna say, did you mean like in a class
Yeah.
setting, like for
So
an
the
assignment?
presentation, so
Yeah.
we had individual things within the presentation. That struck me as, let's work together as a group of 5 on a presentation, and then you take slide 1, you take the interaction or the self-check on slide 2, you take the self-check on slide 3. That might be kind of a fun way to get
Yes.
them thinking about what's important, how do I
And I
communicate
think
it?
branching scenario would also be a good one.
So can they do
I'm
that?
intimidated by branching scenarios.
Well, so if you had a group of people and they all came up with a different ending, and then you tied them together into a branching scenario.
You're right, that'd be smart.
So
That
do
might
the
be too
students
much.
have access to do that, to create the H5p
They can.
questions?
Yeah. You can set that up
Okay.
in Pressbooks.
Okay.
Well, and on the h5p.org, anybody can create a free account.
Yeah.
So,
But if you want support, it's through Pressbooks.
Yep. Okay.
Right.
So just to clarify, you know, you showed us how to get the content into Canvas via this LTI link, but, you know, so then it's not available, but how, you know, how do we put things into Canvas if we want to?
So if you want to get the LTI for H5p outside of Pressbooks,
Or can we?
so
Your department would have to
yeah,
purchase it.
and it would also have to go through a central vetting process for the LTI to be
That's the part
approved
that's
to
already been
use,
done by system.
But it's different.
But it's
Or
different
system,
for
but not for
Madison.
Madison.
Oh,
Yeah,
Madison's gonna have a separate.
It has to do its own.
Yeah,
Legal
we have our own process.
But a way
Yeah,
that you could get around that is everything in Pressbooks.
Yes, I
Right.
thought you were gonna say something scarier.
Yeah,
I would hope that the vetting process in Madison would be simpler since it has gone through system legal, that they could share documents.
That would be.
But
Yeah,
I don't know,
that would
because I don't know.
All right, so the way to do it is to embed it into Pressbooks and then embed Pressbooks
Into your,
Into
Yes.
Canvas,
So it's
yeah.
like Pressbooks is sort of the middle person for
Mhm.
our
Interesting,
our
isn't it?
setup, right? Like we have
Yeah.
to go through Pressbooks to get the H5p stuff into Canvas.
Mhm. Yeah.
oh, yeah.
Okay.
So then here's the strategy. You create a class Pressbook to replace the textbooks, so your students don't have to buy a textbook. They're all on board with that, right? Every group gets a chapter and is responsible for their own WordPress text and an H5p presentation within that. And then the individuals within the group can all break that into pieces and boom. Yes.
We did that in a grad seminar this past semester, where the graduate students had to create a chapter in a shared Pressbooks. And essentially, what you got out of it was something that could be like a lesson plan. If they were ever to teach that text, they would be able to use their chapter.
So authentic work that they can use again.
Yep, and then also each student has a chapter, and then the whole book is sort of this edited volume, if you want to call it that.
Something for their resume, a link they can send to grandma.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So in the 2 minutes that we have left, I just wanted to put up these questions, just sort of maybe post-live reflection, or things for you to think about, you know, this weekend or at a cocktail party and ask other people. And I think we've addressed some of these. What are some of the obstacles that you envision for your own development of interactivity? And Peter, you mentioned this and the conversation about LTI integration and whether or not there's legal permissions and purchasing that. But do you think there's any obstacles for students in their own interactivity? We've talked a lot about behind the scenes, but all of this is necessarily for student learning outcomes. You, sort of off the top of your head, any obstacles that you would imagine?
In my case, I sometimes worry that the students that would benefit most from self-checks are the ones who are more likely to just skip it if it's not required. So I don't know how to,
Yeah.
that's just a question that I have, I guess.
Yeah. Sort of
So
encouraging them.
my
to-
question to that is, are those the same students that wouldn't do the homework anyway?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
whether it's in
Right.
H5P
Whatever
or something
format.
else.
You can only be so responsible, right,
Yeah.
for what the
Yeah.
students do.
Yeah. It's, is this also, accessibility issue?
Yeah.
Um,
That was the second question.
H5P does pretty well accessibility wise, but the hypothesis annotations,
Not.
not good.
accessibility in that, like, people who afford internet
Oh.
access, computer, but
Yeah, so like
also
an
digital
affordability
literacy.
concern, yeah.
So the audience type may not be from 19-year-old to 24-year-old. Is there anything that blocks or hinder learning by using this?
I think if you were going to ask them to create content using H5P or Pressbooks, that would probably be a barrier for people who are less technology savvy. But just accessing the content is quite easy. So I don't think that would be an issue for learners that don't use technology very much.
Do screen readers work well with H5P?
With H5P, we did an accessibility review on it, and there's some question types that have issues, like you can imagine hotspots or
I was just
images,
gonna say,
things
is
like
that
that.
not?
It's not so good, and we have on our KB a whole list of
Of what works
accessibility
and what
concerns.
Is that in the activity sheet?
I don't think so, and honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, I think it might be for atomic assessments and not for H5P. But there are accessibility concerns for image questions that you would be using with really any sort of question authoring platform. But hypothesis the annotations do not work properly with screen readers, so that's something to consider.
Can be a big barrier to.
Yeah.
How is hypothesis on mobile? So I'm thinking back to Sarah's example, where you have the text right there, and then the sidebar of that. Like if my screen is only 2 inches wide or 3 inches wide, that might be an issue as well. But I mean, they figured out other ways of doing that. Is it? I imagine it's put below it or above it the way the Canvas adjusts their sidebars.
So is H5P here to stay?
Is anything here to stay?
Should I invest my time
So
learning it?
Pressbooks is here to stay for the foreseeable future, so H5P is part of that, so I would say yes.
Good enough for me.
Well, we are officially out of time, but I will leave you with this last question. Where do you go from here? For those of you that are sort of getting started and acquainted with H5P and Pressbooks, I'm sort of thinking about your own personal trajectory, and those of you who are Diamond Medallion status members. With H5P, sort of what's your next step? What's the new project you're working on? So if you could fill out the reflection sheet, even by the door.
Go to the conference.
Yeah,
It's,
it'll be good, it's gonna be so
The
good.
conference still has workshops, if I remember correctly, where people are actually in, it's a big part of it.
Yeah, I do want to touch on what Lauren brought up, the Chrome issue with H5P and Pressbooks. So I don't know if anybody else has heard, but Chrome is going through some updates that is going to block third-party cookies by default. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it too much. But basically, it prevents embedded content from being loaded into sites like Canvas. So we did some pretty extensive testing, and H5P in Pressbooks and Canvas runs into some issues. So you'll be able to view the content, but the H5P questions will not show up. So the way to get around that for now, while H5P is working on getting their content to not require third-party cookies, you just have it load a new window, the students access the content outside of Canvas. So we lost the embeddability when you're accessing the content through Chrome, but just have to deal with that for right now if you want them to do the H5P activities. And I did some research, and it is H5P that's the issue, not Pressbooks. So you might want to talk with them about how that's going to affect your LTI, because it does use third-party cookies. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And if you run into issues or have questions about that, just contact the Do It Help Desk and say you want a consultation, and then you'll meet with me. Figure it out. Yes.
Awesome. Well, happy weekend.
Thank
everyone.
you.
Now we're going.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking at the Pressbooks site.
Sure, yeah,
So if I log in, am I supposed to be able to use my NetPedia, or do I have to create an account first?
So you probably don't have an account yet, so I can actually create one for you right now. If you access any content through Canvas,